Welcome to the World of Rare Disease, a show that focuses on awareness and education about rare and complex disorders. My name is Lisa Deck, and I am a rare disease patient, a Rare New England board member, and your host for today's show. Today, our guest is Rich Horgan, the founder and president of Cure Rare Disease. He has a deep passion for Duchenne Multiple Dystrophy, which is what his younger brother grew up with. Rich has a strong interest in accelerating promising treatments for Duchenne Multiple Dystrophy. Today, we're going to learn about Rich's story and how his organization has worked to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you for being here, Rich.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So we want to start and talk about COVID-19 in the years 2020 and 2021 has disrupted and changed many organizations. I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about how it's impacted Cure Rare Disease.
Yeah, happy to. And again, appreciate having me on to your show. For those listeners who may not be familiar, who didn't catch the first episode, Cure Rare Disease is a nonprofit that I founded out of Boston, Massachusetts. We are developing tailor-made or customized therapeutics for rare genetic diseases that don't have any solutions, through a collaboration of academic and industry researchers that we've pulled together. So COVID. To put it lightly, has been a real challenge for the U.S., for us, for the whole world, and for us in terms of sort of its initial impact. It was slow at first. So what we initially did, actually about a year ago this month, crazy enough, as time has flown by, is initially we moved our dosing experiment, some of our earlier experiments, to exempt facilities that weren't going to be shut down. If you remember, about a year ago, we had certain organizations and some organizations closing down at different rates in different states. And so we needed to make sure that there was going to be as little disruption as possible to the research. And we were able to do that by moving our initial study to Charles River Labs instead of doing it at Yale, who was shuttering at the time. From there, it became a bit easier to plan for it once that initial wave had washed over us in March and April in terms of studies. Where some of the challenges popped up were actually more on the development side, in terms of organizational development and fundraising, than necessarily on the science and research and development side, fortunately. So we had a number of events planned for March, and of course our gala later in the year, and other events, which unfortunately just had to be either converted into virtual events or canceled outright. And of course, as sort of looking at our organization through this lens of, we need to move fast and urgently because we're literally running out of time. That's something that's very scary to feel. So I tried to stay ahead of it and really react quickly, taking advantage of programs that the government had released, such as PPP, looking to reallocate efforts to virtual event fundraising. So we moved into esports back in about May, and esports has been incredibly successful for us, I'm pleased to say. I think a lot of the lessons that we learned, I don't want to get too far ahead of your questions, but I think a lot of the lessons that we learned by pivoting, we'll keep and hold on to a number of those efforts, including esports.
Right. So it sounds as though, so the specialty of your organization is working to develop this custom therapeutic. And you're saying COVID didn't impact the science and research too much in development on that side. You were able to kind of come up with a solution. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like how you managed to continue kind of the push ahead for the therapeutics?
For sure. So, I can dive into some specifics here. So we, in terms of what Cure Rare Disease does, we're a virtual company. So we were already virtual before virtual became the new thing in town. We allocate and send off our research to different parts of the collaboration. And so, for our mouse experiments, for our animal experiments, those will be done by either Charles River Labs or Yale. A lot of the difficulty with the actual execution of the R&D as COVID started and continued to rage on was not so much in having the experiment happen, fortunately. Charles River Labs was and continues to be open. They are able to continue to operate with COVID procedures in place. And that was great for us because our mouse experiment, which was planned to start in March, was able to continue on according to schedule with only a couple weeks delay. Now, the challenging part in terms of maintaining continuity for R&D actually comes more so in the logistical side of the equation. As we ship things around, both domestically, but especially internationally to other collaborators in Spain and abroad, that's where things became difficult. With society's move, staying inside, so much e-commerce business picked up across the board. So instead of going to the store, we were ordering things online in much greater sense, which makes sense. But what that translates for R&D is that with the shipping channels more clogged with other retail goods and just other goods in general, that slows down the shipment of other things. Now, some of these materials are time and temperature sensitive. And so what we needed to do was we needed to buckle down much more on the logistical side of the house, making sure that we were tracking shipments every day, you know, in some cases hour by hour, to make sure that they were delivered on time. And then that if there was an interruption, which there were several of, that we had a contingency plan in place. Who were the boots on the ground? Who could go retrieve the shipment? Another example that comes to mind actually is with our plasmid manufacturer, Aldevron. Aldevron, we were shipping some starting plasmid material from Yale, where it was created, to Aldevron to manufacture, and shipping was delayed by a couple days. Well, those couple days happened to end in Christmas. And so it's time sensitive and it's temperature sensitive. And so, you know, Aldevron really went out of their way to retrieve the shipment from the carrier, even when their shipping docks were closed. And so we were very grateful for that. I think it's a testament to our collaborators, the degree to which they believe in the mission and want to see it succeed, when you've got the shipping manager of Aldevron driving to meet the FedEx guy on Christmas Eve. So, you know, it's you know, some of this I feel like you see it in the movies, but, you know, I would say overall it was and is the logistical challenges of R&D that posed some of the greatest challenges, versus the actual just execution of the experiments themselves. Right. A lot of these experiments, once you start, you just leave it in life for, you know, 4, 8, 12 weeks.
Right. And now, so I know in our last call, you were talking about kind of with the FDA, and I know it seems though, from what I'm hearing around kind of our community, is so much is being kind of pushed aside for COVID. Have you felt the effects of that in terms of, you know, approvals and things like that are happening?
It's a great question. So there's 3 main points with which we engage the FDA. Or 3 potential points. The first is what's called an interact meeting. It's a non-binding meeting that provides guidance and feedback on, you know, early studies. The second is a pre-IND meeting. That one, while an optional meeting, gives some very powerful advice and guidance now that there's been progress made with the development plan, and also a path and sight to the clinic. So we chose not to do an interact meeting. One of the potential casualties, I think, of COVID has been that, you know, the FDA, especially CBER, because that's where vaccines go through, biologics, and that's where we go through too as a gene therapy, has had so much capacity drained towards COVID that the timeline for interact meetings, as I understand it now, is very long. And so we elected to skip an interact meeting and go direct into a pre-IND meeting, because those timelines were not being pushed to the same degree. And so fortunately, you have to schedule these things super far out. I think we submitted our request for the meeting in the summertime, and then we ended up having it on schedule according to the FDA in October. Now, we've yet to see sort of any delays with regard to IND approval. We haven't, we'll like I mentioned in our last call, we'll submit our IND later this year for FDA's approval. Now, I'm hoping and praying that some capacity is eased up and that we don't see significant delays with an IND approval or feedback from the FDA. But you know, with our FDA experience through the pre-IND, it was very evident that the FDA had taken the time to read through everything. They were very well informed. They were very on point. They listened to our thoughts. They listened to our feedback. We listened to their feedback. And so we and I really see the FDA as a collaborator in this whole process. The drug that we're dealing with is a CRISPR transcriptional activator. So to my knowledge, it'll be a first in human. And that raises hopes, but it also raises, you know, concerns and cautions that we need to make sure to do this right and extremely, extremely thorough with the program, so that we're able to help programs that come afterwards. But as far as the FDA goes, great feedback. Really, we're willing to listen and learn with us as this is a first in man technology.
Right. Excellent. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. That's promising, and hoping that things keep moving forward for you and for the many other rare diseases out there. So I'd love for you to mention, you talked a lot about kind of the fundraising and events and that you had to pivot. So let's talk a little bit more about the success you had in that, and then maybe some advice for other organizations who are in that same boat.
Sure, happy to. So like basically every other nonprofit out there that does any sort of in-person fundraising, which I believe is most, we had to postpone and or cancel a number of our events. Events in Florida, events in Massachusetts and surrounding states, in Connecticut, had to be postponed. Galas, golf tournaments, this type of thing. Fortunately, we were able to have our golf tournament as COVID had sort of hit that low point back in the summertime. And of course, reduced capacity following all the COVID guidelines from the CDC and the state government. But we needed to pick up fundraising steam from somewhere. And so we looked at what can we do sort of in this virtual environment. Now, esports became a very natural segue, as we've seen the success that St. Jude has had with their partnership with Dr. Lupo and other streamers or influencers. An influencer is an individual who plays and streams a video game to an audience to raise money for charity. Not always raising money for charity. Oftentimes that's their job to play video games and support themselves off of that. But for us, it's been a great opportunity and something that is sort of unintentionally on brand. A lot of rare disease patients have differing physical abilities. My brother, for instance, can't go outside and play basketball, but he can definitely whoop my butt on a game of Call of Duty, for instance. And so, just beyond the idea that we can raise money off of it, it feels incredibly inclusive to us to introduce or try to introduce a new population to an esports community that may have never heard of rare disease. What's really interesting is that, we did a stream with an influencer this past weekend for Rare Disease Day, or a few weekends ago for Rare Disease Day. And what was incredible to see is the commentary in the chat. You've got individuals who, the influencer may not have a rare disease, but the people watching, you start to see them pop up and say, my dad has this, my brother has this, my son has this, I have that. And it's really, really inspiring to see those voices come out. Because before, I would hazard a guess to say that there would likely be not that commentary, if not for Cure Rare Disease being so sort of positioned on the charity stream, where we would sort of create a safe and comfortable environment for people to come out and share their stories. I think ultimately, above all, rare disease makes you feel really alone. But when you start to see that, another person talking about their experience with their own unique rare disease, it's really inspiring to see that. And it really warms my heart to see that this is such a win-win-win. We get to have a population who's traditionally excluded involved in events. That I just love that. We get to see them being able to share their stories, and we get to see progress made in terms of supporting drug development efforts for cure rare disease. I really think it's a wonderful trifecta. And hats off to all the streamers too who do charity streams. If you're thinking about, if your listeners are thinking about doing a charity stream, I highly encourage you to do so. You don't have to raise $1 million. Every little bit really does help. We have streamers who raise $10. We have streamers who raise, $40,000. So it's a whole range of different opportunity for people to really make a meaningful difference in this effort.
Right. So I'm going to ask the simple question,
Sure.
as many of our viewers may be in the same boat. So I do know what a streamer is. I do know. So they're playing video games and they're talking and they have an interaction with people. How is that a fundraiser? How does that?
Absolutely, yeah. Happy to share. So you've got, and I'll try to break this down relatively straightforward. So you've got an individual, say it's you, Lisa, and you have, you like a certain video game. You'll be playing that game. You'll have some sort of webcam watching you, and you'll interact with the audience who is typing back and forth to you. There's a whole chat function. There's a whole community of individuals that are watching you play that game. and you'll have an ensuing dialogue of all sorts of different topics. And the streamer will recognize that dialogue and start to interact with the individuals who are watching them. Now, what's baked into that is the opportunity for those streamers, if they do believe in the cause, if they want to support the cause or the streamer, to make a donation on behalf. And what's really great about the technology is that the donation function is actually embedded into the stream, so that, as you know, if I'm watching you play, I make a $50 donation to you, that pops up on your screen. Now, the best streamers out there will say, oh, thanks, Rich, for making that $50 donation. I get that instant gratification in front of, 100, 1,000, 10,000 of people watching that, I've committed to helping this cause. You get the satisfaction and really the goodwill that you as a streamer really care about this cause and are helping to make a difference. So it's goodwill for the streamer, the influencer, it's support for the charity, it's awareness for the charity, and it's a chance for people who may never have been exposed to the cause to say, oh, I'm actually impacted by that. It's a great trifecta.
Thank you for breaking that down. I just happen to know who some of our viewers are, and I don't know that they would understand what it means. So thank you for explaining that. I appreciate
Not at all. Very complex. It's a bit complex, but if people are interested, encourage them to go to, I think tiltify.com or Cure Rare Disease has a page. That's a traditional esports fundraising mechanism. Twitch, of course, which is owned by Amazon, is one of the dominant platforms as it relates to viewers watching and gamers streaming content. So it's like the YouTube of esports put differently.
Right. Yeah. So I have teenagers, so I'm a little bit aware of this. So it's very interesting. So you had a couple ways you pivoted and you were able to keep the business going and keep the drum beating. What advice would you give to other organizations who are, whether they're dealing with COVID or they're, just looking to kind of recreate or come up with new ways to, raise funds and kind of reinvent their organization? Sounds like that's what you were doing. I'd love for you to give some advice, please.
Sure, happy to. So I don't know if I have a perfect answer for you, to be honest. I think, we looked at sort of a situation where, okay, we can't be in person, but we still need to raise money. What are our options? Sort of keeping in mind that this idea of Zoom fatigue is very real. And so, esports was a great way to do that. We launched a line of Cure Rare Disease wine through a distributor partner. That was a nice way to do it as well. And so it's kind of thinking, what resources do we have at our disposal that we kind of can think creatively about reaching our donors. I think above all, one of the lessons that was really kind of drummed into my mind was, don't lose contact with your donors. Skipping annual events is a great way to do that. If you can't have the annual event in person, try to pivot to virtual. Will it be as good? Maybe, maybe not, but at least you'll still have an opportunity to engage with your donors. I think not losing that engagement, not losing that momentum as much as possible is really important for other nonprofit leaders out there. For drug development, I think it's a great chance to look at it and say, okay, we developed a vaccine in a year. How can we apply this same urgency and this same result to rare diseases? Now, of course, COVID versus Duchenne or COVID versus ALS, COVID impacts a lot more people and it's a global pandemic. Although the individual situation that is suffering from ALS or DMD, it's even more real to them than potentially COVID is. What lessons can we take from this COVID experience and really apply them to rare disease? A lot of people are talking about this. I think we really have to get into the details of how we can take these lessons and actually apply them to rare disease. Can we run trials in parallel? To what degree can we see regulatory flexibility with diseases that are 100% fatal? It's the early days. We're still, but I'm certain, reeling from and continuing to deal with the impact of COVID. So, I think those lessons will take some additional time to kind of be reflected upon and ingrained into the thinking of not only the regulatory body, but also drug development. Ultimately, everybody wants drug development to go fast. Some things you can speed up. Some things are functions of biology that just simply can't be sped up. And trust me, I've tried. It's very difficult to speed up biology. But I think sort of, all jokes aside, I think how do we look at our community and communicate with our community in a way that they feel as though we, a nonprofit, haven't gone away, that we've not lost touch, and that we're still continuing to execute the mission despite, headwinds, some of which are significant.
Right. Excellent. Well, that's great advice and great way to look at things. Do you have any final words for our viewers? And if not, we're going to be closing up our show.
I think just a big thank you for having me today. I encourage your viewers to reach out if they're interested. They can go to curerareDisease.org. We're across social media, of course. All of our handles are at Cure Rare Disease, and no level of involvement is too insignificant, right? We've got people who simply like us on Facebook and make the occasional donation. We've got people from DECA, the school organization that's national, who volunteer. And so, I think it's important for people who are impacted by rare disease to really get involved. I think it's important that you really look at the organization you're getting involved with. It's important that the dollars raised are really going toward the mission. What's the overhead rate? What are the executives getting paid? I really believe that that people need to get involved and get involved with the right organization.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Before closing, I want to say a great big thank you for being a guest on our show. Great new insights and information that we can bring to our viewers. This show, along with all of our shows, can also be found on the Rare New England YouTube page, as well as our social media accounts. From all of us at Rare New England and all the patients and families who keep rare disease in motion, thank you for watching. And remember, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, and then think zebras. Thank you.